What's going on YouTube? It's Tej back again with another video, and today we're talking about the Miami Dolphins in our season preview series, and hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you do, be sure to hit that like button and help me out a ton. And if you're new around here, want to see more of this series and football content just in general, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button. And tell me what you think about the Dolphins down below. You know, how much does that Tyreek Hill trade move the needle for you? How many wins do you think this team comes away with? Who are some X factors and some games you're looking forward to watch the Dolphins play this year? Love to have your thoughts, and I respond to just about every comment. So let's talk about Miami down below. If you're new to this series, welcome to it. Be sure to go back and check out our older videos, but let's waste no more time and start talking about the Dolphins. So you'll see something that looks a little odd. So my projected win total is below that of the win range. That's because the longer I sit with it, the more I start to like the Dolphins. So originally in my regular season, way too early record predictions, I had them at 6 wins. That is going to change, and we'll kind of talk about that once we get position group by position group so you can get a feel for my roster. But 7 to 11 is a wide range, and I totally understand that. Even if you're not a big Tua guy, I think you understand that Mike McDaniel raises the floor just because of the offense and the scheme itself. So the 7 wins feels pretty safe. But that being said, man, if it all comes together, this team could be scary because there's a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. And again, I like Mike McDaniel, and with that much speed, specifically at the wide receiver spot, and then 2 shutdown corners, you can do a lot with that. So. Really a fascinating case study, and we're going to learn a lot about the importance of a wide receiver one like a Tyreek Hill, and how you can build a roster around a quarterback on a rookie deal, and maybe what are those most important areas to spend money on. And with a left-handed quarterback, Teron Armstead right now playing left tackles, that we're just going to learn a lot this year. Basically, long-winded story put down to one sentence. So that win total is going to change for me. So we'll go ahead and start talking about each and every position group, and we'll talk about Tua later. So I'm going to save a tangent there because obviously Tua is the biggest X factor in this team. And, it's such a cheap cop-out to have him there, but just like Zach Wilson with the Jets, he will determine how far this team goes. So hopefully stays healthy. Zach Wilson might miss some time now. Maybe miss week 1 and 2, maybe just week 1, but we're not talking about the Jets today. So then you get to wide receiver spot, and lots of investment there this offseason. You talk about signing a Chase Edmonds and Raheem Mostert, specifically Edmonds. They signed him very early on in free agency, so I'm excited to see what they do with him. But guys with speed, and for a Shanahan, wide zone rushing attack, yeah, that's about the only box you need to check. So good work there from the Dolphins. Then you get to the wide receiver room, and of course Tyreek Hill. That's a big add, and that's adding to after Jalen Waddle proved he could be a wide receiver 1 last year. So this team has 2 ones, and they signed Cedric Wilson, who feels like a pretty nice 2. So this wide receiver room has an abundance of talent. That's why you're seeing Preston Williams being shopped and whatnot right now. Also, he's playing a lot more inline tight end right now, so I'm kind of interested to see how that transition goes. But Mike Gesicki is a guy I've always been high on. Just an unbelievable athlete. I mean, you're talking about a guy who was, highly recruited or highly regarded recruit as a tight end, 3-star defensive end, state player of the year at volleyball, has an awesome basketball highlight mix you can find on YouTube. Dude could throw it down like no other, which you'd expect with his size and vertical, but just an all-around athlete. This dude, give him a ball, and that guy would be good at that sport. So really excited to see what that looks like in that inline spot. Can they get a little bit of a Kittle role for him? Not been known as a great blocker, but man, that'd be interesting to watch. And then the offensive line, so much investment there. You talk about signing a Teron Armstead, who again right now playing left tackle, which is not the blind side for Tua Tagovailoa, so that's interesting. And Connor Williams, also a solid, stable guard, and they got him at a fair deal, so that's always a good add. We'll see how center ends up shaking out, but talking about Liam Eichenberg projected to start at guard. Actually, I think Connor Williams will be playing center. Now that I think about it, looking at our lads, so Connor, I was a pretty big Liam Eichenberg guy coming out of Notre Dame. My only hesitation was his arm length. So it's like, maybe right tackle. Maybe he could be a Braden Smith. But I think moving inside the guard, I think he'll be just fine. I think you'll get a solid starter there. And then Robert Hunt has the ability to be an above-average guard, which is always nice. Even scored a touchdown last year. It was one of the craziest moments of any game I saw last year. So that point aside, really solid athlete. And even coming into the NFL draft, mauler. This guy feels like a set the tone type of guard. We're going to run right behind Robert Hunt. And I think he totally has that potential, and also with some experience playing tackle, so the pass protection has kind of come a long way since he was a rookie. So excited about that. And I think he can really be an above-average starter there at right guard. And then the question mark. We'll talk about Austin Jackson later, but he is Tua is a huge. He might be the NFL's biggest X factor. if not for that, Austin Jackson would most certainly be the biggest X factor on the Dolphins, just because he's like the one last weak link on that offensive line. But we'll talk about that later on. Then you get to the defense, and we'll talk about Jalen Phillips. But talk about signing a Melvin Ingram, and you have Emmanuel Ogbah making a lot of money, but he's back on the interior. Raekwon Davis, Christian Wilkins, who had a really nice year last year. That interior of that defense, and specifically that front seven, is looking really, really nice. Talk about Phillips, Ingram's solid. They also have Andrew Van Ginkel, who feels like a guy who really can only work in these, New England Bill Belichick-esque defenses that ask their outside linebackers do varied roles. And then the inside linebacker spot was one I considered for X factors. Jerome Baker's a really solid athlete. He is strictly a headhunter in my eyes, though. Pretty decent in coverage, but you look at it, Pro Football Focus grades, just because that's the easiest way to quantify this. But his best grades were in coverage and in pass rush, so it's like, literally, just let this guy loose. He's a loaded gun. Just point him in a direction, let him go. That's what it feels like. And then, Eldon Roberts, getting a little old. Never been someone who's overly impressive. Like another one of those guys looking at his PFF grades. Best in pass rush. So you kind of wish they had a thumper, somebody to help in the run game. And maybe Roberts takes a step forward there. I think like a 55.2 grade in run defense last year. So not good. But if he gets better in that area, and that feels like the one spot they're kind of missing from the linebacking room. If they get that step forward, this defense just becomes that much more legit. Then you get to the secondary, and dude, the cornerback duo is legit. You still have Noah Igbenogany, former first-round pick out of Auburn, who has great size and length, and definitely a project, but one, man, if it could hit, and you add him with Xavier Howard, Byron Jones, look out. That's going to be crazy. And then you have Javon Holland, who can play in the nickel. He can play box safety. He can play over the top. And, if you've been around this channel for a while, you've heard me say this 1,000 times. I was big on saying there is not that much of a difference between Javon Merrick and Javon Holland. Like, people in that 2021 draft class were making it feel like it was Merrick and no one else. But, man, it was Merrick and Holland for me, 1A, 1B. And Holland was a stud last year. So I'm really glad to see that, I saw a little bit of truth that came to the field there. And you can do so much with him that it's just like, what do you do with the other safeties? And, they're bringing in Eric Rowe, who just all in all, solid, just a solid player. But then you also have Brandon Jones, former third-round pick. So it's just an interesting component to where it's like you can do so much with a Javon Holland that when you're doing one, like let's say you're playing him in the box, there's an opportunity cost of having him as a deep safety and a playmaker. So that's where, like, Eric Rowe has to play good football. Brandon Jones has to play good football. So they were also honorable mentions for that X factor. I was thinking about Brandon Jones specifically, like how much better can he get in year 3? So moving on, realistic goal, reach goal, they are what they sound like, and the one thing that Miami needs to get out of this season, record aside, they have got to be able to have a full assessment of Tua. They have got to know at the end of this year, is he our franchise guy or is he not? Because then without that answer, you don't really know how you want to build the team. If you know he's not the guy, especially given the investment in wide receiver and all the money they poured in the offensive line, then like, hey, all right, we got to find a different quarterback. And then once you get that quarterback, you're a really good roster, right? So, and then if he does break out and have that big jump that they're hoping for, then this team becomes kind of scary. So then reach goal, I could have gone further with this, but because, of course, every team's trying to win the Super Bowl, right? And, I think about Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and those two corners. I'm like, this team could be sneaky for that, but let's keep it relatively tame, I guess, despite it being a reach goal. Be the top wildcard team, which that in and of itself, if you're the 5 seed over the Broncos, the Chargers, whoever doesn't win the AFC West, right? Or the Bengals, Ravens, whoever doesn't win the AFC North. That's a pretty massive achievement in my eyes. So if they go 12-5 and are the number 5 seed, still having to go on the road in the first round, but they edge out, a Denver, a Baltimore, or something like that for that number 1 playoff wildcard spot, I'd be pretty impressed. And that would signal that a lot went right. And, this team could win the division, right? Like if the Bills fall short of expectations and the Dolphins really click, there's absolutely a pathway there. I just find that to be slim to none and when it comes to their odds of being able to do that. So let's talk about these X factors. And these are, just for reference, like I truly consider my X factors as people who are 50-50 propositions. They could totally go up and above expectations. They could fall short and not superstars here. Like Jalen Waddle should be a stud. Tyreek Hill should be a stud. Xavier Howard, we should expect great things. These are guys who, going into a season, you really don't know what you're going to get. So that's why they're on the X Factor list. And Tua Tagovailoa, like I said, might be the biggest X Factor, wild card player in the entire NFL, right? Because if he looks like, him checking in the second half of the National Championship game, and it was Bama, Georgia, if memory serves, and takes the league by storm, this team's going to be scary. But if it's more of the same from Tua and, doesn't want to push the ball down the field and a couple of questionable decisions and some random inaccuracies, it's like, all right, well, looks like Miami's in the quarterback market for next year. So he absolutely has to be on this. Now, I think this will be the best year of his career, and it's tough to gauge that because just like, a Daniel Jones or Zach Wilson, to pick on those two New York quarterbacks, it's like the situation around them has gotten so much better that it should be the best year of their career. So, like, how big of a step forward do you need, right? Just because they get better and it's a career year doesn't mean that those teams should sell out on those quarterbacks and say, yep, that's our guy. That's our franchise quarterback. Because that's still ignoring that you did a lot of work to improve their situation and make them better. Did they do enough with that to have you sold on, we can go win a Super Bowl? That's what it comes down to. Can we win a Super Bowl with that quarterback and the situation? And so I think Tua's going to have a career year. It's just how big of a leap is it this season? And that being said, like you look at, and part of the reason I am going to change my win projection is I've been thinking about it, and I think they're going to see a lot of too high coverages. I don't really think that was a fad from last year to try to slow down the Bills and the Chiefs of the world. I think that's a direction that defenses are going to try to adopt. And maybe once we get to teams' bye weeks this year, it'll kind of revert back to the norm because it's like, hey, that was just kind of a Band-Aid for last year, and it was helpful, but offenses have found answers to that. But I think you're going to see a lot more of that. And I look at Cedric Wilson, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle. I'm like, dude, if I'm Tua, I don't need to throw a pass more than 5 yards almost. Like, get the ball into the hands of those guys. Let them be twitchy guys making plays with the ball in their hand. So that's where it's like, if you're going to see more of those too highs and force offenses play underneath, there's something about that wide receiver room that is perfectly skilled and grouped together to be able to do just that. And even Mike Gesicki, for that matter. And then, Chase Edmonds and Raheem Mostert, these guys who are unbelievable athletes, very fast and hard to bring down. So there's so much of the skilled position group that makes me say, dude, this team could totally play a dink and dunk style and rely on yak as their means of moving the ball down the field. So it's kind of, it's different. You don't see a whole lot of teams doing that other than Kyle Shanahan kind of in San Francisco with Jimmy Garoppolo. But I think something about that really makes sense and could work in Miami. So that win total is going to change because of that. But that being said, as much as I think they can do that, Tua's going to have to show that he can make some plays down the field, because that's where it comes down to, right? Like, can you make a big-time throw in a big-time game deep down the field and, make the most of the move we did or we made to get a Tyreek Hill? Can you maximize that? So we'll still need to see that. But there's something about that offense and how it's poised. If we see more too high, and that's a big trend next year, this Dolphins team might be uniquely built to beat just that. So let's move off of Tua. Obviously, if you're a fan of the NFL, you've heard enough about Tua Tagovailoa and how big of an important role he'll play in the Dolphins season this upcoming year. Austin Jackson has just as big a role because, again, he's it's a weak, the entire NFL and the way your roster is built, it's a weak link sport. And the offensive line in specific, right? Like, you can have 4/5 of it, but when you play Myles Garrett and the Browns, like, Myles Garrett's going to line up over the guy who's the weak link. And if it's Austin Jackson grading the mid-50s again, like he did the first 2 years, that's going to be a tough sell. And again, this is so interesting that Teron Armstead, you pay him all that money, he's still playing left tackle when you have a left-handed quarterback. So Austin Jackson is the blindside protector. Now, granted, you're going to see a lot of boots, and I'm sure he'll be, he being Tua Tagovailoa, he'll be rolling out to the Teron Armstead. That's also the left-handed side for Tua to work with, so it totally makes sense. But man, Austin Jackson's got to take that step forward. And, I'll lay out a pathway for it. A lot of tackles are rough their first 2 years. And then year 3, it all kind of comes together. And you even saw a little bit of that last year with Andrew Thomas, where from year 1 to year 2, he took a step forward. We didn't see that with Austin Jackson. That's not to say it's impossible in year 3. DJ Humphries is a perfect example. Donovan Smith's another solid example where sometimes it takes 3 to 4 years. And then these guys just figure it out and they become solid. And that's really all the Dolphins need Austin Jackson to be. It's not like they need him to be this, Trent Williams clone. They just need to be good. They literally just need Donovan Smith over at the right tackle spot. They just need somebody who can be league average. If you're good enough, then we feel like 1 through 5, we have at least an average starter at every offensive line position. And that only makes Tua better. It only makes the wide receivers that much better. It improves the entire offense. So I think that's a big plus. And, there's something to be said about new coaching staff coming in, new offensive line coach, how that might help Austin Jackson, but also the scheme itself, getting numbers advantages, forcing defenses to show, strong weeks, all that sort of stuff. I think that's, really something that could impact and improve Austin Jackson's play. So I'm still hopeful, despite the first 2 years and the returns on his play being pretty bad. So then last one, Jalen Phillips. And he feels like as much as I talked about, inside linebacker, they could get a little better there, and safety outside of Javon Holland, how is that going to be deployed? Jalen Phillips feels like the one, if I could have one player have a career year on that defense, I want it to be Jalen Phillips because Melvin Ingram's solid and you have Andrew Van Ginkel. So maybe Ingram's even just like a DPR type and you're using Van Ginkel in a versatile role as a starter. And then you talk about those interior three on the D-line, Davis, Agba, and Wilkins. Super solid there. Phillips was a little disappointing in his rookie year. Not a whole lot of, not a great pass rush win rate. Overall pro football focus grade in the low 50s. So yeah, you left some to be desired. That being said, this guy who was unbelievable coming out of UCLA and felt like the most polished edge rusher in that 2021 draft class, but also felt like a guy who, given his medical situation, still didn't see the field enough, and there's still some room for him to grow. So if he stays healthy this year, man, I still think you're tapped into a guy who is, which sounds so crazy to say, both refined but also raw. So I just got to see what we're going to get out of Jalen Phillips. Now I understand those two words don't go together, but man, this guy has the hands. He knows how to win. Now we just got to see it kind of come together and, blend that, pass rush technique with his athleticism because he is a good athlete. So maybe it just took a year at the NFL level for him to kind of fully piece it all together and get acclimated. One more offseason maybe helps as well. So he is definitely the X factor. And if you talk about him hitting, and that's a big reason why he's on this X factor list, because if Jalen Phillips becomes what he was expected to be as a top half of the first round selection, this defense becomes really, really scary because, again, the interior three are really solid. Van Ginkel, Ingram rotating like that. Corners, great. Safety, you have a stud in Javon Holland. You can figure out the rest. Eric Rose, fine. If Jalen Phillips becomes like a legitimate force on the outside, this defense is nearly complete. And you bundle that together with the offense, which has so much there to be explosive. That's where this team becomes a 12-win team. Like, this team could go 12-5 if Jalen Phillips becomes, who they expected him to be, and then the offense kind of clicks and Tua, meets expectations, then maybe even a step beyond that. So there's a pathway. Now you're relying on a lot of if statements and leaning on a lot of asterisks. I understand that, but at the same time, you're talking about a quarterback with a QB-friendly offense, and you're talking about a tackle in a system that will make him look a little cleaner. You're talking about Jalen Phillips going into year two, and edge rushers, just like tackles, sometimes it just takes time. Sometimes it just takes any position time to acclimate to the NFL and its game speed. So talk about the X factors enough now. We'll move on to our games to watch, and AFC heavy here, but week 4 at the Cincinnati Bengals, the first primetime game on the schedule for the Dolphins. This feels like the first big chance for the Dolphins to kind of on a national stage. Now, granted, there's enough fans across the NFL, just about every game feels national, and have red zones and all whatnot to make just about any game a national game. But that being said, Thursday night, this is an island game. Everybody's watching the same one. This is a big chance for the Dolphins to punch upwards, especially given the expectations for the Bengals this year, and just made it to the Super Bowl last season. This is a big opportunity for Miami to be like, hey, yeah, we're here to compete. Well, like you're talking about the Bills, you're talking about the Chargers, you're talking about the AFC West, you're talking about the Ravens and the Bengals and blah blah blah. We're here. Like, don't sleep on Miami. So this is kind of that first game that really could put them on the national stage and move them into the top 10 of people's power rankings, and maybe even more top 8, top 5. So big opportunity there. And again, prime time that kind of shaped our rhetoric a ton. Fast forward a couple weeks, Pittsburgh Steelers. And this is an interesting one. Pittsburgh secondary is a little weak. So, what is Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle? This is a real chance for Tua to ball out, right? Like, I want to see him shine in this game. Now, that being said, it's also a good test for the state of the Miami Dolphins offensive line. This would be a good litmus test to say, like, how much better did you get? Because you're going against one of the best pass rushes in football. Can you hold your own against the Steelers pass rush? And then flipping sides, those corners against Pittsburgh's wide receivers, I got to see that because, one, Pittsburgh just has a knack for always, drafting and developing good wide receiver talent. George Pickens looks legit. Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson's there. Also Pat Freiermuth. So, Javon Holland, how does he match up against some of those pieces? And then, of course, Navian Howard and Byron Jones. Like, how do they handle those, promising young wide receivers in Pittsburgh? And then also the pass rush. This should be a game where Jalen Phillips comes away with at least a sack. Maybe this is a multi-sack showing because Pittsburgh's offensive line is also a little rough. There's some young players that might get better. They bring in a James Daniels, sign a Mason Cole. Might be an improved unit. But that being said, this could totally be a game where Jalen Phillips shines, and this is a game I'd like to see him have a good showing in. And then last one, Week 14 at the Los Angeles Chargers. Could have some wild card implications here depending on how the division shakes out. maybe the Dolphins are surprising, and maybe it has some implications 1 through 4 if the Chargers and Dolphins are both leading their respective divisions. So obviously seeding implications this late in the year are always part of the conversation. But it's also two teams that have made massive investments into their roster, trying to maximize the window that they have with rookie quarterbacks on rookie contract deals. So, for the Chargers, it's really bolstering the defense, and for Miami, it was stimulus of talent on the offensive side. So, a couple different ways of doing that, but they're two teams in a similar position. It's just the Chargers have kind of the luxury of knowing, Justin Herbert's our quarterback for the next 10 to 15 years. Miami's still waiting to see if Tua is that guy. But that being said, this game becomes really, really good if Tua is like, hey, yeah, I'm that guy. We were drafted 5 and 6 for a reason. I'm just there. I'm just as good. I'm there. If he takes that type of a leap, not even necessarily to an elite quarterback, because I think Herbert is an elite quarterback. Let's just say, if you're looking at my QB tiers, if Tua becomes one of those pretty good quarterbacks, he moves his way into the area, the top of the solid, into the pretty good tier, one of those, tier 2 or 3 for me. This becomes a really interesting matchup. One, because, pick 5 is Tua, pick 6 is Herbert. That's going to be, discussed heavily. But also, if Tua takes that step forward, that roster is in a really good spot. And then you look at the Chargers, that's as well-rounded a roster as there is in the NFL, maybe a top 5 complete roster as a whole. And I want to see those two teams duke it out in LA. It's going to be great weather. I hope there's a ton of points put on the board in that game, but also two teams with good defenses, so it could completely go the other way. But those are my games to watch, and that's going to do it for my Miami Dolphins season preview video. Apologies again for my long-winded changes, specifically in the X Factors category, but hopefully that's what you're here and clicking on this video for. So tell me what you think about the Dolphins. Am I on the money with those X Factors? Do you think I'm off? How many wins did they come away with? Who are some true X Factors other than the 3 I listed? And what are some games you're looking forward to watching this team play? Love to have your thoughts, and again, I respond to just about every comment, so let's talk about Miami down in the comment section. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. It really would help me out a ton. And if you're new around here, want to see more sports content, just hit that big red subscribe button. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej. I'm signing off.